Welcome to the Conscious Pivot Podcast with international speaker, business mentor, best-selling author of Pivot, and your host, Adam Markell. The Conscious Pivot shares the stories and wisdom of people who have successfully reinvented some area of their business and personal life. You'll gain powerful insights into how you can fully embrace new opportunities, increase your performance, and master the art and science of innovation and resilience. So please join Adam as he guides you on your conscious pivot.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Markell, and I am feeling wonderful today. I've got an incredible guest to share with you in just a couple of minutes. But before we get there, I want to just take a moment to ground myself and remind all of us how important it is that we are reminded. I think a reminder of the reminder to be grateful for us. This moment is very, very important. And I know that we all have so many things we can be appreciative of and grateful for. We've just come through a traditional time of the year when people are kind of focused on gratitude and giving thanks. And it's an interesting thing because I don't know that I love the holidays. I love all the holiday seasons. And yet I think to myself, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we just lived that way all the time? Does it take a holiday to bring us to a point of remembrance for various things? And why couldn't it be that we live with gratitude, as an example, each and every day, so that we get the benefits, the kind of benefits that we've just been experiencing, this feeling of appreciation and even in the midst of challenge or change or struggle or death or any of the other things that sort of get in the way of our peace or get in the way of our happiness, that we can transcend those things through gratitude and through gratitude practice. So this is a reminder to me, as I get to also remind others in our community, that today's a great day to be grateful, and it doesn't take a designated holiday to kind of make it, to give us permission for that gratitude to be a part of our experience, and for each of us to give ourselves that gift, because that's really ultimately what we're talking about, is our own personal opportunity, our responsibility, and the permission that we either give or deny ourselves to feel good in the moment about our lives, regardless of, the circumstances. So I am very excited that I have got an incredible guest, somebody who, just before we turn on the camera and the recording, I found out we have mutual friends. That's always nice when those synergies pop up, and never a coincidence either. I just don't believe in anything that's random in the world, in the universe. So Jennifer Urezzio is the founder of Soul Language and a master intuitive who uses her intuitive skills to help raise consciousness. What could be more important than that? Soul Language is a paradigm to put tangibility to soul, which I really want to get into that, what that looks like, because that's really exciting to me. She's the author of 2 books available on Amazon: Soul Language, Consciously Connecting to Your Soul for Success, and a little book of prayers. You can learn more about her at soullanguage.us. But without further ado, Jennifer, it's great to have you on the show, and welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I loved your opening thing about gratitude. I have traditionally in my life done drive-by gratitude. So I've had to really work on gratitude. Drive-by gratitude is like, oh God, thank you for blah, blah, blah. But oh, by the way, I don't have blah, blah, blah. So gratitude is an ongoing practice for me because I tend to kind of skip that sacred practice.
Yeah, interesting. And I think on some level, again, I believe we all do that. I don't think this is a sort of a unique thing. We take things for granted, and not necessarily in some negative way. I don't think people wake up in the morning and they put their feet on the floor and go, hey, I'm going to take everything for granted today. I'm going to take, my breathing for granted, and my body and my friendships and my family. No, we don't do that. We just sort of live our lives and go about doing things that are, sort of in the moment required, the sort of the triage of daily living, so to speak. But we can take a different approach to it. So before we get into a little bit of your work and the pivots that you've experienced in your life, as we were joking before we turned on the recording device, we're like, oh man, we all just go through so much of this pivot stuff, micro pivots and macro pivots and all that. I would love to know, the bio that I've just read about you. What's not written in that introduction? What's not written in that bio that you'd love for people to know about you?
There's a lot actually not written in that bio. I think, I used to joke around in corporate America about how, I couldn't talk to clients because I would tell them the truth. Now I get paid to help people discover their truth and to help them kind of tell the truth to themselves. And I get paid to listen. I think what's not in that bio is I am always pushing the innovation box. I'm a huge creator of tools and worksheets and programs, and I think that we're all creative beings, and I think there's a lot of us out there that are constantly creating and don't know how to kind of understand what to do with all those creations. So they leave all of these little babies all over the place without any proper nurturing. And one of the things that I'm really good at is helping people understand how to nurture all of their creations. So that's not in my bio. I mean, how do you put that in a bio, right?
Well, I don't know. You did a pretty great job. Nurturing creativity is a beautiful thing to be known for, and a great kind of a legacy, if you will. So I don't know. Maybe that does go in your bio. That's a pretty good one. Let's get into a bit of your pivot story. So take us back as far as you want. I think our community is used to hearing the stories of the good, the bad, the ugly, and we all love them. We love these stories because A, they tell us we're not alone, and B, they're super interesting and they teach a lot, as is the case with most of our even more vulnerable moments in life. So take us any place you like.
The one that just popped into my head is the major pivot I did coming out of art school. So I went to art school, which is so funny and not funny now. I went to art school for photography, and I think one of the reasons why I didn't pursue that was because I was really uncomfortable being so vulnerable in the spotlight. And you have to be, completely raw as an artist. And so the first pivot was, okay, so I have a degree, and now what do I do with that? And I just didn't want to work in a studio. I couldn't see, starving for being an artist. And I did a major pivot. I have this kind of tenacity about writing my own history and writing my own destiny. And I decided that I was going to work in public relations. And I knew nothing about it. So much that I didn't, people like, oh, so what is public relations? What is that? My family would go, and I would like stumble across my words. So the first really major pivot was like, okay, I know in my soul and I'm an artist, but I just can't do that. What can I do now to really utilize all of my gifts and talents, and which direction will that be? And that huge pivot was stepping into corporate America, which doesn't seem like a huge pivot to people who've been in corporate America, but I'm a renegade. So to be in corporate America and to adapt that way a little was such a huge kind of mindset and adjustment, and kind of a walking on a different floor for me. And so I really had to kind of learn how to manage up. I'm a great manager down, but managing up, I sucked at it because I would be like, wait, you're crazy, right? Like, we can't make a round box square, right? That like FTD working on this program 72 hours and revising it 85 million times, you're going to lose this account, right? You've already lost it. And so to really manage up was a huge pivot in my life. And when I said to my mom, I took a job in corporate America, I think she was so shocked. And I made it work. I made it work for 17 years. But the way I made it work was every time I wanted something different, I literally wrote my job description for companies and I went for it.
Yeah. I want you to go back to something you said earlier, which I'm not sure if everybody understands entirely what you mean by the distinction between managing up and managing down. And I think we all definitely understand what it's like sometimes when our parents don't get us or don't get what we're up to, kind of tilt their head on the side, or our family does. So
like a dog.
yeah, we should talk. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So please explain that, unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah. I was a great manager for my team. I always was for the underdog. I would support them. I, stood by them. I wasn't the type of manager that would go, okay, get it done, and I would leave. I was the first one there and the last one to leave. And I really wanted to make sure that every member of my team was listened to and was really getting their needs met. Managing up, which means managing who's managing you, was traditionally difficult for me because I was never someone who would say yes. And I think sometimes in corporate America, managing up, you have to say yes a lot more than I was comfortable. So I would go, yeah, but. And they'd be like, yeah, no buts. And I'd be like, whoa. And so the managing up was traditionally really hard. I had to practice, my community will laugh at this, because I had to practice my pass the butter voice. And I mastered the pass the butter voice. So I can say F you to someone in my pass the butter voice, which means, hey, can you pass the butter? And nobody knows I'm doing it. And I think that was a key to really get my point across with honey versus with vinegar. And I think that's the key to managing up. And as a little kid, my mother always said that to me, and I never really firmly grasped what she was talking about until I started to be able to kind of do that with my superiors and go, I understand what you want, but here's a different way of doing it, that this way is going to work. And so it became, I became a valuable asset to my superiors because I would see things in a clearer way and in a straight path rather than the traditional way that they knew or that they wanted to get done, which was mostly impossible.
Yeah. So is there an element of managing up that involves your being available to receive mentorship and guidance, or because I'm trying to get a sense of, were you coachable? Were you finding that you weren't coachable?
I'm more coachable now than I ever was.
I mean, back then, absolutely.
Back then, I was always coachable if you use the right phrase.
So people right now are probably laughing, and I hope they are. I hope you guys are, because how funny is that? And how often that when we say, to ourselves, oh yeah, I'm totally coachable. I am so coachable as long as you approach me the way I want to be approached.
Exactly. If you didn't tell me what to do, if you valued my opinion, if it was a discussion, I was right there.
If I knew you trust me.
Right.
You trust, you're not micromanaging me, you're just looking out for my best interest, really, you have them at heart. So,
but if you told me what to do, meaning if it was your way or the highway, that never worked. Yeah. And the lucky thing, the amazing thing was I was so good at my job. I was so good that I could write my own ticket with it because I was that good. And so I had, parts of my job that, as a media relations specialist, other media relations specialists had to write. I didn't have to write because I crafted my job so I didn't have to do it. And I think, when you have people in your life that can see the goodness of you, that is so key to success. Back then I had a strong, I was a steel marshmallow. I had that steel externally, but inside I was a giant marshmallow. So if you knew that I was a giant marshmallow, then you could totally work with that. But if you just saw the steel and wanted the steel to be different, then there was going to be friction.
Yeah, interesting. And when you were speaking about how good you were at what you did, I also wanted to say this. I didn't want to interrupt you, so I'll say it now. You were exhausted as well.
Of course. I mean, I was working at 12. I mean, it was so funny when I think about it now, prior to a big campaign, just before I would have to get on the phone, I would lose my voice for 15 minutes. I know what that's about now spiritually, right? I was exhausted, and I was the answer girl just like I am now, but in a different way. So people all over the office would go, Jen, do you know about blah, blah, blah? And I go, oh, blah, 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 blah. And they would go off and they would research it and they would come back and they'd be like, how did you know that? And I'm like, I don't know. But, I was using my intuition. I was being my life purpose in corporate America. It just was a really sucky delivery system. Now I'm being my life purpose with an amazing delivery system. And I think so often pivots come when people are starting to align their sacred purpose and their delivery system at the same time. And I think most people go about trying to find their life purpose based on a delivery system, not on their sacred purpose. And so they kind of get into some rocky areas because of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm just taking a few notes here because I want to make sure we are closing loops as we open them. So that really resonated with me deeply because in many ways, when I look back on my history, so I was a lawyer for 18 years. You were in corporate America for 17 years. Maybe that's the sort of the incubation period for for figuring shit out. I don't know, or for misery, but probably for the last 7 or 8 years of my career, I knew something was wrong, something was off. And to put your language to what was off, I often articulate it a little bit differently, but I love how you framed it. So I'm going to just borrow your framing here and say, the delivery system was not aligned for me. As it turns out, when I look back now, 10 years after I closed my law practice, I'm still teaching. I was doing then as a lawyer, and I used to call myself a counselor at law, not an attorney at law, because the counseling part was the part I loved the most, was working with people to resolve their challenges.
Right.
And it was a great business model because people are riddled with challenges. They're riddled with problems. So for me to be a problem solver and get paid really well to do it was great. But the delivery mechanism, the system sucked. And you used the word sucky delivery system. The law for me was a sucky delivery system. Whereas the transition out of that into the work that I do now and speaking all around the world and training other people to speak and curating a community of people who are pivoting and in their lives, this is a very different delivery system. Yeah. One that I wake up in the morning and now instead of feeling dread about the day ahead, I feel joy. I feel inspiration to start. So why don't we fast forward to, I guess, that same point in time, the inflection point, the pivot point, where you decided to leave corporate America. And did you immediately transition into the correct delivery system? Was there a few little pivots along the way before that? Yeah, give us a little.
So that's really very interesting because as everything happens, you sometimes only can see, in my verbiage, how God works when you're past that point. So I was asked to speak at a conference about essential oils and life purpose. I was still, working with my best friend in, her PR firm. And I got up on stage and I did my thing and I got off and there were people lined up to talk to me. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And people are like, can you help me? Can I be your client? And I was like, oh, okay, let's do it. So in tandem when that was happening, at one point during my PR career, we had this international known coach. And I spent 2 hours on the phone with her, counseling her about her relationship with her daughter. And the next week she fired us. And she said, I didn't know who she was or her business. I did. I just saw a bell on the curtain and she couldn't take it. And that was the moment I turned to my best friend who was my boss. And I said, okay, look, in 3 months, I'm going to go freelance. And she's like, great. So at the same time of that speaking engagement, the 3 months was rolling around. She's like, okay, so are you going freelance tomorrow? And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, I've already made plans. She didn't make any plans. It was that lovingly push out into the universe. And so I went freelance and I was doing some PR work for her and taking on these clients. And what I really noticed was on the PR days, I was crying a lot. And I don't cry. I was crying a lot. And I was so angry. And someone had offered me a $25,000 PR job, which would have paid a lot of bills for a very long time. And I had to make a decision then and there is what I want to do, how I want to be, my own sanity. Was it worth the $25,000 or was I going to pivot and take a leap of faith? And I made that decision and I've never regretted it. So that was a huge pivot. It was a pivot of jumping out and freelancing. It was another pivot of saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And then it was another pivot, which I think is the biggest pivot of all, of trusting. I think if we're going to really think about it for a second, I think I pivot all day long because there's always some area or some place you have to turn to and trust. And that's a huge practice. And it's a huge opportunity for a lot of amazing things to happen. And the moment that I turned down that job, I got 3 new clients, which equaled to $25,000, right? And so I was like, okay, this can be real. And I think part of the pivot process is not just trusting that it's all going to work out, but it's also understanding that you're being guided in that pivoting process, that you're not alone. And I think so often when we pivot, we think, oh my God, no one's ever done this, or, oh my God, I'm totally alone, or, we tend to make up those bad stories in our head instead of going, oh, I've done this pivot before. The circumstances are just different. I think the reason why we pivot is always the same.
Yeah, what do you think the reason is that we always pivot?
I think it's always for expansion and always to bring more goodness into our lives.
Yeah, which doesn't always feel true.
No, and sometimes it's moment. No.
Right.
I mean, and I think when it doesn't feel good, that's an indication, in the moment when it doesn't feel good, when you're on the floor, in the fetal position eating cheese, because that's what I do when I'm upset, right? That's how you know you're on the right track. When you're pivoting.
And again, it's so counterintuitive because I'll never forget the day that closed my law practice. So after 18 years of practice, we finally got to the point where we were closing, and this was a mile marker in my pivot was having created a plan B. So I wasn't the kind of person who does what some advocate, which is jump ship, and tell your boss, I'm quitting, jump off the cliff because the parachute will appear and all that kind of thing. I'm much more conservative. And I also had a lot of responsibility at the time, like we all do. Being with 4 kids and 2 dogs, and I think we had a gerbil and goldfish, and a lot of life, a lot of living beings that were my responsibility, including a lot of clients. So it took about 2.5 years for me to pivot out of and wind down my practice. But when we were closing it, and I remember the shred-it truck was sitting out in front of the office for 2 whole days, and they shredded,
wow,
like 10 years of documents that I no longer needed to keep. And I was in the office. Everything was cleared out, all the furniture, all the file cabinets, and I'm lying in the fetal position in the middle of the vestibule,
Yeah.
and just sort of writhing in pain because it was the end of an era. There was a great deal of unknown on the road ahead. There's that sort of fear, always fear of what we don't know or what I didn't know at the time. And the devil, is maybe sucks, but at least you know what you
where
got.
you're going. Yeah.
You know what you got, right? This was completely, an unknown road. So yeah, I can really, really identify with that description. So you end up following that path. And I think where you said the pivot of trust is so important, because I think that's the biggest challenge for folks is if they knew, people listening and watching this right now, if you knew that it would all work out, that starting your side hustle would work out, that starting that business you've always wanted to start, or changing jobs, changing careers, doing something else that you would love, whether it's to go travel or it's to do, live out your calling to be an artist, whatever that might look like for you, if you knew it would absolutely work out, as in you would not be destitute, homeless, dead, or otherwise, despised, you wouldn't lose all respect, but quite the contrary, that your experience of living would be enhanced in ways that you can't even imagine. Your connection to yourself, your trust in yourself, your trust in the universe, your connection to spirit, that all that would just enliven as a result of moving forward without the benefit of 100% certainty. Everybody would do it.
Yeah, everyone would do it. And I think there's this misconception about trust. I think people think that it's like eye color and you should have it. Trust is an active participation. Just like faith, it's an active participation. It is a choosing. It is something that you get to activate and turn to. So, I always use my body's divine intelligence. Divine intelligence, fill me with a feeling and knowing of trust. And I'll do that until I can feel my energy shift. And sometimes, especially in a major pivot, I have to do that 1,000,000 times a minute. I do it 1,000,000 times a minute. I think we're so hard on ourselves. And so I think that people are like, oh, I just wish I could trust more. Well, every opportunity is an opportunity for you to choose trust. And especially when you're moving through huge change, it's about finding that place in you and everyone has that place where it's never been hurt. It knows it's whole and complete. And really tuning into that place and being guided by that. And we do have a lot of chatter. I had a cat in a rented apartment. I didn't have kids, and a car lease, right? So, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I didn't have a family to take care of. So I think my fear was huge, but it was a lot less fear than you had because I wasn't responsible for other people's lives, right? So it's really about understanding, your greatest strength in that core belief that's unbeatable. So my core belief that's unbeatable, that gets me through any pivot, is I know I have courage, right?
I love that. Yeah. I know I have courage.
Right? So you have to determine what your core belief is of goodness and really sit in it. We all have that challenge limiting belief. And I think so often there's this kind of protocol of spirituality about eradicating that limiting belief. That limiting belief is there for a friend. It's there as a signal for you to choose something bigger. So I know for me, when fear, when lack, when not good enough shows up, I know that that's an opportunity for me to go, okay, I'm going to make the choice to trust. I'm going to make the choice to, do a ritual, do a sacred practice. I'm going to call someone. I'm going to, sit down in my courage. I think that there's a kind of a roadmap to completing a pivot. You just need to find out what your roadmap is. And if you kind of analyze any pivot you have done before, a lot of those clues will be in that for you.
Yeah, there's no question that looking back at the road behind us is such an incredible, it is the crystal ball. People say, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. BS. I'll call
Right.
BS on that, because we all have a crystal ball, and it is counterintuitive, right, Jennifer? That this is the idea that people, and it's kind of, personal development 101, to say, focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. I remember learning that very early in my, on the path for me. And it's true on a level, and it's also misleading on a level, because people are taught then and trained then not to look at what doesn't work. Whereas, and I love this turn of phrase, when you know what doesn't work, you know what does work.
Yeah.
When you know what you don't want, you also know what you do want. So it's this idea that to look at your limiting beliefs, for example, with the eye toward eradicating them is fine. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But to also look at them with an eye toward gaining clarity on what it is that you actually want to believe about yourself. Because, oftentimes in our work, we train speakers. And by the way, when you talk about a roadmap and a plan, that's exactly what Pivot is. So the book is that roadmap looking backwards, just like you said. So I made these pivots, and then I realized there was a roadmap in looking in the rearview mirror. In the crystal ball, I had a crystal ball for exactly what we did. And I thought, well, great, let's share this with people. And then ultimately, like you say, the bigger game was we got to share it with the world, and still do. That book is just widely, sold every day, which is a wonderful thing. But then we also started to examine the other folks, the case studies that we could get our hands on of people who'd pivoted, and look back in the rearview mirror as well and said, well, where are the commonalities here?
Right.
What are the common denominators in what they did to successfully navigate their own pivots? So that was cool. What I think is really neat about what you've just brought up is we talk in a different arena, this public speaking arena, about developing and getting clarity on your core message, because so many people are not clear on their core message, which means you can't position yourself, and people can't position you if you don't understand your core message, your brand promise, right? Lots of ways to put it. But what's really neat to me is the idea of what's your core belief. Yeah. So looking at what your limiting beliefs are, which might have to do with worthiness, deservedness, self-love, any number of things. You're not smart enough, not good enough, not pretty enough, not skinny enough, whatever those beliefs might be. And then saying, so what is my core belief?
Yeah.
Knowing that these are limiting beliefs, what is actually a core belief that I can see clearly now would help me to transcend those limiting beliefs. So your core belief being that I know I have courage. You think about the fact that we are pivoting constantly. Like my son said to me the other day, Max, he said, Dad, we're always like involved in micro pivots. And I said, well, what do you mean about that? He goes, well, your book is, like pivot. It's such a big word. And people think, gosh, a pivot, it's like I got to quit my job and move to Fiji or something, right? It is, but we really just pivoting constantly.
All
like
day
our
long.
mindset. Like I got a shitty thought, I'm thinking negatively, I'm in the past, I'm regretting something, or I'm resenting something, or I'm hating on somebody, or I'm comparing myself to someone else. I'm looking, instead of looking down the road ahead for myself and moving forward, I'm looking to the right and I'm looking to the left, etc. Just make a change in the moment
is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And I think so often so often people are looking for the golden ticket, that big, huge, you've won the game, the golden ticket. And my life, I can tell you the golden ticket moments, but the little moments, the little pivots have had huge impact, and they led up to the golden ticket moments, and so I'm really conscious about making that conscious choice every moment. And the conscious choice is based on that core belief. Am I courageous? Yep. Am I going to work through this? You bet. Am I going to face my lack today? Of course. And it allows you to really tune into something higher. I had a mentor that told me once, pain is boring. Everyone's pain is the same. It's just different circumstances, right? But what's really interesting about human beings is that connection. because everyone connects differently and everyone describes it differently. And I think how we come out of the pivot, how we, navigate, that's exciting, because that is about the combination of soul and humanness really working together to triumph, and that's what is so exciting when I talk to people about transformation, because that's where the gold is. Tell me more about that. And all of the failures, you just missed your mark. You just missed the mark. So we need to, go a little left or go a little right, or, move this way or move that way. And you eventually will hit the mark.
This is how they got to the moon. I mean, it's a pretty widely used analogy or example, but the first time that we landed and departed the spaceship to walk on the moon, this was a series of thousands of pivots, probably millions. I mean, I've never gone and researched just how many changes in direction, micro changes, were made, but those micro pivots is what helped them to get there. And there isn't a straight line in the universe anyway. So to hold ourselves to it.
So do you know what, when JFK asked the scientists if we could go to the moon, do you know what the scientists said?
Please share.
If you believe we can, we can. That's a huge statement if we think about it. Like, okay, wow.
Well, our beliefs are so often self-fulfilling prophecies.
Exactly.
So here he is. I mean, and we can go back now, I guess, and I suppose it almost seems even a little trite, but at that time, the idea of going to the moon was literally insanity.
Totally.
And say by the end of the decade, which I think he was speaking about that in the very early part of his term, so early 60s, 61, 62. To say that, to throw the gauntlet down, that by the end of this decade, I think I might have said century earlier, but the end of the decade, we would land, and step foot on the face of the moon was ludicrous.
Right.
And yet, looking back now, it's, we're about to land, for the 18th or 19th time on Mars, not with a human being, but so things for sure are very much a part of, or in the realm of mindset. I mean, sometimes it's in the corporate arena even, and I do a lot of corporate speaking. We train people to do that sort of thing. We are talking about, what is the value of mindset to tangible business, or the actions that we take every day in business. And it's a huge reminder, because in 1969, they had certain resources available to them to go to the moon, just like we have resources today that are available to take us to Mars. Everything that was necessary to put that into action, to develop it, to iterate, to practice, test, fail, and pivot and move forward and ultimately succeed. Everything that was available in 1969 was available in 1869.
Right.
Everything. All the resources were in the ground. We were not there mindset-wise. Would have been heresy, or they locked somebody up in the loony bin to say that in 1869. Right. I mean, we hadn't even flown yet. So the value of that is I think just bears reminding. Tell us a little bit more about the transition into the work you're currently doing and how it is, because I know you work with and coach coaches. So that's both, I believe in the personal development arena, but it's also on the side of business and on the side of business development in particular.
So, it was like the transition was like going downhill on a bike without brakes, and it's so amazing. I mean, it's 11 years now since I kind of downloaded the paradigm called Soul Language, and we're up to 20 coaches. I work with groups, I work with one-on-one, I work with business development. I've been lucky over the last couple of years to help people write now marketing materials and ghostwrite books. So it allows me to do a lot of the things I love. I think what has been so amazing about the paradigm of Soul Language is that it puts tangibility to something that's intangible. which is soul. Not to put you in a box, but humans love to have words for things. And so when they have words for things, they can connect in a very conscious way. And so what soul language does is it defines the three core energies of soul: your mission, how you fuel that mission, and then your soulful personality. And we can do a personal soul and then a business soul as well. And what's so funny about business people, especially entrepreneurs, is that they think that they are their business, and they're really not. You call in a business to do something bigger, first for yourself and then for others. So it has its own agenda. And so I, like any other soul language practitioners, we really work with people to be conscious, to utilize their soul in a conscious way. Over the last couple of months, the phrase has come up, on Facebook and, here and there about, oh, my soul's crying, my soul's in pain. And I'm like, no, your soul is whole and complete. It's your humanness that is revolting. And so it's about really soul language. And what I do is help people align their soul with their humanness. It's a structure to help the mind follow the heart.
That's so, unpack that just a little bit more, because one of those areas again that we end up having a lot of discussion about is how it is that you speak from the heart.
Yeah.
You move out of your head and into your heart. So
yeah, I think, here's a perfect example for everyone to play with. So if you start looking in the mirror each day, look in your eyes, and a lot of people are going to have a hard time with this, but look in your eyes in the mirror and say that you're enough 3 times, your mind is going to start chasing why you're enough. The mind's job is to keep everything at status quo. And so the mind is based on pattern. It's based on keeping you safe. While the heart is always geared towards your expansion and your goodness. And sometimes those things are competing. So when we say we allow the mind to follow the heart, what we're really saying there is we're allowing the mind, which creates structure and strategy, to be guided by something that is geared towards goodness, that knows that you are loved, whole, and complete. And when that happens, what occurs is freaking bliss. Because the mind will fill in the blanks of goodness. So it will come up with strategy of your greatest dream or your greatest vision. So I hope I unpack that a little for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a question of what is the heart anyway? Because we know what the mind is. We have a sense of that, even though one of our clients actually wrote a book called An End to Upside Down Thinking, which is really about turning the paradigm. The book isn't about turning the paradigm upside down. It's exposing the fact that if you buy into this, materialism is about that the brain creates consciousness, that's why when we die, our consciousness is extinguished according to traditional scientific belief systems, paradigms, teaching, etc. And that the proof to the contrary is that consciousness exists outside of the mind or outside of the brain, and the brain is the receiving set for consciousness that exists non-locally, and therefore when we pass, for example, consciousness doesn't necessarily die in that moment. Now that's extreme, and that's a lot of implications there.
We could do hours on that.
We could do hours on that, so we won't do that here. But the idea that people understand basically that the brain is something, this the thinking piece, and so speaking from our heads is speaking from that sort of logical knowing, or like you say, the part of our brains that is designed to keep us safe, is designed to be right because being right means we're safe, all of that sort of amygdala stuff. And the part of us that's non-brain related, we call the heart.
I think that heart, that soul, is that part of us that...
Isn't that our subconscious, though? Aren't we just talking about when you're an intuitive and you help people?
Yeah, no, it never feels that way to me. It doesn't feel like something's buried. It feels like it always feels like, a summer day. So it feels pure and clean. And there's this, when I talk from my heart, there's this feeling of knowing that there's just something big out there, that I am this drop in this ocean of goodness. And that's why it's so exciting for people to understand what that soul and what that heart feels like to them, because it's so personal. And, soul language puts silly human words around something that's, totally intangible, so we can understand it or connect better with it. But understanding that heart and that soul is vast, and it's never boring. And, the moment that I think I've got a grasp on, the total capabilities of that soul of Jen, something happens and I'm amazed again. It's that part of you that knows when you stand in front of a mountain that, oh my God, this is beautiful. That's that part of you that, is unexplainable. When you see someone you love, there's that feeling of warmth. It's all chemicals and blah, 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 and we can dissect it. But there's a part of us that knows that there's something unexplainable within us that's guiding us. I do this exercise with clients about understanding the baseline of their soul. So I'll ask them just to take a deep breath and focus on their tailbone and connect to their heart. And I'll go, okay, ask your soul to vividly and clearly describe to you what the baseline of your soul is. And I'll hear love, peace, freedom, all the big things. And people will go, oh my God, that's so big, or that's so general. And I'd be like, yeah, because that's what soul is. It's big and it's general and it's cliche, because our silly humanness can't get the message. So we keep getting it in several different ways. So, and I love this conversation because no one has ever brought this conversation to the table, which I love, about really how to describe what the heart is. Soul, yes, but, I think just like the brain is an instrument for us, the heart is an instrument to interpret soul.
Yes, it's a feeling instrument.
Yeah.
And to be in a feeling space, to be in a place where you could be guided by something that isn't of the thinking mind,
right,
puts people in a very vulnerable space. And so from this perspective of communication, whether it's one-on-one or it's one on a lot of people, to be able to access your heart through your feelings and to be safe doing it, or to at least be safe in the vulnerability, because you will be vulnerable. I mean, I've been on some very, very large stages, and spoken from my heart meant, or having spoken from my heart meant, I wasn't scripted in that moment. I wasn't coming from my head to pursue some agenda, but was rather being present in the moment with what I was feeling, and then guided to the words from that feeling space, which is incredibly powerful, both for the person who's doing it, because it's very selfish in that moment when you're being a channel for that kind of communication. It is one of the most blissful feelings that I've ever experienced, and I've done a lot of things that have brought me joy and bliss, but this is one of the most incredible experiences. And second, it is an incredible means to connect.
Yeah.
So to imagine being in China, and you've got 12,000 people there that don't speak English, and yet you're speaking from your heart, and there's translation happening, and you have a room full of connected souls.
Yeah.
Through that is just ridiculous, right? I mean,
it's huge. And as you're talking, what cracks me up is, I've traveled in Russia, I've traveled, all of the world, and whenever I travel, or wherever I go, people will come up to me in whatever language they speak, and they will tell me their deepest, darkest secret out of nowhere. And I go, okay, I know what you're saying, but I don't really know how I know what you're saying, nor do I know how to really fully express, but I'm just going to stand here, listen, and then I'm just going to say something. We'll see what will happen. I think that's about being connected and being really open enough to know that we're all connected. And I think that's huge. And I think, for speakers, I always call that speaking to someone's listening, right? So when you know yourself, when you're connected, when you know your message, and I'm not talking about knowing the words, I'm talking about knowing and embodying the message.
Mm.
When you can speak to someone's listening, that's huge. That, people walk away and they'll be talking about that message to their friends or to themselves, or they'll be thinking about it one shape, form, or another for years, and you'll stay with them. And I think that's about really understanding who you are, accepting it, and loving yourself, and being connected to that thing we call soul.
Yes. I'd love to know if you've got a ritual, some practice, daily practice that you feel really keeps you in that space that you're describing. What
Yeah,
does that look like?
I do. I'm a renegade, right? So I get bored easily. And so one of the daily practices I always do is I write an affirmative prayer. I love writing prayers. So I'll do that. I also love to sing. I know when I'm really upset, that's a time to sing, to get all of that stuff out of me. So that's one of my rituals. Another thing of my rituals is, I will ask myself a question. Well, really, God, universe, tree, Bob, cupcake. I'll go, okay, blah, blah, blah. And I'll go in the shower. And before I'm done, that answer or that guidance has popped. So those are some rituals that keep me sane and connected.
Beautiful. I have so loved, as you said earlier, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think
Thank
this
you.
is incredibly interesting to me personally, valuable to me personally, and I know for sure to our community as well. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Of course, it's called The Conscious Pivot, so I couldn't imagine a more apt conversation for this show. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Way cool. To our community, I'll sort of bring things to conclusion. It's so funny because I always find myself resisting calling it an end, because it's really just the beginning, as we know. With where I'd like to conclude, though, is with how we began. It's always nice to bookend these things and see how cause and effect are really one, supply and demand are one. The illusion of time, I think, is one of the greatest issues for us. But in the present moment, there is no time. It is all collapsed. I mean, nobody ever knows how 10 years pass by. We just go, wow, it was just 10 years ago, a second, just a second ago, literally. And now we're here. So we started with gratitude. And the reminder is that we experience gratitude even when we don't feel great. And certainly when we sort of least want to be grateful, there's an opportunity to open up to gratitude. Everybody got to wake up today. This I know. See, I can look in my crystal ball and know that everybody that's watching this right now, listening to this, woke up today. I know that. I don't even have to know you. And I know that was true. My affirmative prayer is that we all get to wake up again tomorrow, because that's not a guarantee. And it wasn't guaranteed today. And we don't know what tomorrow brings. So that's a blessing. And when it is that you do wake up tomorrow, that you have that blessing, that you can be grateful in that moment, just knowing that there are people then there, right in that moment, who are taking their last breath as you are taking your first conscious breath of the day. So it is a special moment, and babies will be born taking their first breath as well. So it is in many ways something that is holy. So I hope that you will remember these words tomorrow when you do wake up and you realize you're opening your eyes, and you get to choose gratitude as the first, not just the first thoughts of the day, but the first seeds that you plant, both in your mind and in your experience of being. And that from that feeling of gratitude, that you can even declare out loud something that is really powerful and has changed my life, changed my experience of living more than anything else that I can think of. I just recently gave a TED talk on this very topic, which will be out in just a little while, but you can put your feet on the floor, stand up if you like, declare out loud, or, from the standing position, from the sitting, from the lying down position, anywhere you like, but you can declare out loud, I love my life. I love my life. I love my life. What if you decided to love your life no matter what and be grateful in that moment? So what a wonderful conversation, Jennifer. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Our folks, we love those reviews. So please leave a review on iTunes or a comment at adammarkel.com/podcast. Leave a comment. We'll reply. We love to get your thoughts and feelings about things. And you can certainly join our Facebook community or get access to other resources by going to startmypivot.com. So startmypivot.com, access to the Start My Pivot Facebook community, as well as the 6 questions. It's a kickstart guide to determine where you are in your pivot, whether it's those sort of micro pivot moment, or maybe it's something a little bigger that's incubating as well. Information about Jennifer, information about Jennifer's soul language work, the coaching that she does, all of that's going to be part of the show notes as well. And we look forward to connecting again really, really soon. Ciao for now, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you now have the tools and greater insights to navigate your own pivot. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at adammarkel.com/podcasts. For more tips, strategies, and support as you consciously pivot into a new business and lifestyle you love, join our Pivot community on Facebook at pivotfb.com.